The match was over, but the story was nowhere close to finished. Under the lights at the National Bank Open in Toronto, Alex Eala had somehow found a way through another brutal test, surviving American Caty McNally in a 3-set battle that seemed to change direction every few minutes. The final score read 6-3, 5-7, 6-4, but those numbers barely begin to explain what happened out there. There was pain. There was momentum swinging wildly from one side of the net to the other. There was a packed crowd that made the stadium sound more like Manila than Toronto. And there was a moment late in the match that left McNally visibly frustrated. So when the American finally sat down after the loss, everybody wanted to know the same thing: what did she really think had happened? Was the crowd too much? Did the umpire affect the match? Did Eala simply play better when it mattered most? The answer, at least from the emotional picture that followed, was far more complicated than a simple excuse. McNally was disappointed. She had every reason to be. She had been within striking distance of turning this match around. But underneath that frustration was something else: respect. And that may end up saying more about Eala's performance than the final score ever could. Think about the situation from McNally's side for a moment. She came into this matchup with every reason to believe she could win. Just one round earlier, she had pulled off a major upset against reigning Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova. That was no small result. Noskova had only recently lifted the trophy at the All England Club, and McNally had taken her out in Toronto. So confidence was not the issue. McNally knew her game was working. She knew she could handle pressure. And she knew she had the tools to make life uncomfortable for Eala. What she also knew was that this was not going to feel like a neutral site match. The moment Eala walked onto the court, the energy changed. Filipino flags were everywhere. Fans were shouting her name. Every winner brought another wave of noise. Every momentum shift felt magnified. Toronto has one of the largest Filipino communities in North America, and when Eala plays there, that connection becomes impossible to miss. For McNally, the challenge was clear: block out the noise, stay disciplined, and make this match about tennis. Early on, she actually started well. McNally moved ahead 3-1 in the opening set, and for a few games it looked like she might be able to quiet the crowd. She was striking the ball cleanly, changing direction well, and keeping Eala from immediately settling into the kind of attacking rhythm she wanted. Then everything flipped. Eala found her range, and once she did, she took off. The left-handed forehand began creating uncomfortable angles. She started stepping inside the baseline. Her returns became more aggressive. Suddenly McNally was the one reacting instead of dictating. Eala ripped through 5 straight games, turning a 1-3 deficit into a 6-3 opening set. And with every game, the building got louder. That is one of the hardest things to deal with in professional tennis. Momentum is not just technical. It becomes emotional. One player starts feeling 10 feet tall while the other feels like the court is getting smaller. Eala suddenly looked loose, fearless, and completely connected to the atmosphere around her. But if anyone thought the match was headed toward a routine finish, the second set immediately proved otherwise. Eala broke early and moved ahead, but then the physical trouble started. During the second set, she appeared to hurt her right foot or ankle and needed treatment. She was visibly uncomfortable. Her movement, one of the most important parts of her game, no longer looked natural. She was grimacing between points, and for a player trying to defend against someone as experienced and tactically aware as McNally, that is a serious problem. McNally saw the opening. And she went after it. This is where the American deserves real credit. She did not just wait for Eala to miss. She made her move. She stretched the court. She forced Eala to change direction. She made her run. She kept putting another ball back and asking the injured player one more question. Can you get to this one? How about this one? And now this one. That is smart match play. When your opponent's movement is compromised, you do not let her stand still and dictate. You make her prove that she can still cover the court. Eala kept fighting, but the second set became increasingly difficult. She twice saw break advantages disappear. At 5-4, She even had an opportunity to serve for the match, but McNally refused to let the night end. The American won 3 consecutive games and stole the set 7-5. Now everything had changed. 1 set each. Eala hurting. McNally surging. And a deciding set still to come. If you were watching from home, this was probably the moment when you thought Eala might finally run out of answers. She had been playing a demanding stretch of tennis. She had arrived in Toronto after winning in Washington, and this was another physical battle. Her foot had already needed treatment. McNally, meanwhile, looked energized by the comeback. But the third set showed exactly why Eala's rise has become such a compelling story. She reset. That sounds simple, but in tennis it is one of the hardest things to do. You can lose a set you were close to winning, feel your body hurting, hear the opponent gaining confidence, and still somehow convince yourself that the next point is a completely new beginning. Eala did exactly that. She broke McNally immediately to open the third set. That early break changed the entire feel of the decider. Instead of carrying the second set momentum cleanly into the third, McNally was suddenly chasing again. Eala, meanwhile, seemed to get a second wind. Her movement looked freer, her aggression returned, and she began playing with the same purpose she had shown during that 5-game burst in the first set. But McNally was not going anywhere quietly. The rallies became longer. The pressure increased. Every service game felt important. Every close call seemed bigger than it actually was because the stadium was hanging on every point. And then came one of the most emotional moments of the match, a disputed umpire decision that became part of the post-match conversation. From McNally's perspective, the call came at exactly the wrong time. In a match already balanced on a knife edge, even one controversial point can feel enormous. It can break concentration. It can energize the opponent. It can turn the crowd up another 10 decibels. McNally clearly felt the incident affected the flow of the match. But here is the important part: a controversial call does not automatically win the next game for you. It does not hit the serve. It does not return the ball. It does not close out a 3-set match. Eala still had to execute. And she did. That is why McNally's reaction is more interesting than simply saying she was angry. Yes, frustration was there. Of course it was. Any elite competitor who thinks a key decision went against her is going to feel that emotion. But she also recognized something much harder to admit immediately after a painful loss: Eala handled the biggest moments better. That matters. There is a huge difference between saying, "I lost because of the umpire," and saying, in effect, "That moment changed the energy, but my opponent took advantage of it." The first is an excuse. The second is analysis. Eala stayed composed. She continued trusting her game. And when opportunities appeared, she took them. McNally, meanwhile, kept fighting until the end. There was no collapse. There was no easy finish. The American continued forcing Eala to earn every inch of that victory. Eventually, though, Eala shut the door. 6-4 in the third. Match over. 7 straight singles victories. And another chapter added to what has become one of the most interesting runs on the women's tour. The physical side of this win makes it even more impressive. It is one thing to win when your body feels perfect and your timing is clean. It is another thing entirely to feel pain in the middle of a match, watch a lead disappear, lose the second set, and still have enough mental clarity to start the decider with a break. That is the kind of thing players remember. Not because every painful victory guarantees future greatness. Tennis does not work that way. But because moments like this teach a player something about herself. You learn that you can survive. You learn that your best tennis does not always have to be available. You learn that sometimes winning is about managing chaos better than the person across the net. That may be the biggest takeaway from Eala's Toronto performance. She did not win because everything went perfectly. She won because almost nothing did. Her movement was affected. McNally pushed back. The second set slipped away. The pressure increased. The crowd became more emotional. And the match had enough controversy to keep people talking afterward. Yet Eala still walked away with the win. For McNally, that is probably what makes the defeat sting even more. She had opportunities. She had momentum. She had already proven she could beat elite competition by knocking out Linda Noskova. She pushed Eala into exactly the kind of messy, physical match that often ends a winning streak. And it still was not enough. But crediting Eala after a loss also reflects well on McNally. Professional athletes live in an environment where every quote can become a headline. One emotional sentence after a defeat can be turned into an entire controversy. So acknowledging the opponent while still being honest about your frustration takes balance. McNally could believe a call hurt her and still believe Eala deserved credit. Those two ideas are not mutually exclusive. And that nuance is important. Because when you look at the match as a whole, there was no single point that decided everything. Eala won 5 consecutive games in the first set. McNally responded by taking 3 straight games to steal the second. Eala broke immediately in the third. Both players had chances. Both players had momentum. Both players had moments when the match seemed to be leaning their way. In the end, Eala simply held onto her advantage long enough. Now look at the bigger picture. Eala arrived in Toronto already carrying serious momentum after winning in Washington. She followed that by beating Alicia Parks in Toronto, then took down McNally to reach the round of 16 at a WTA 1000 event. Her winning streak reached 7 matches, and she continued proving that her recent success was not just a one-tournament hot streak. That is an important distinction. There are plenty of young players who have one magical week. Everything clicks, the draw opens up, confidence catches fire, and suddenly they are holding a trophy. The real test comes afterward. Can you do it again? Can you win when everybody is now studying your game? Can you handle higher expectations? Can you beat players who walk onto the court believing that defeating you would be a statement win? Eala is starting to answer those questions. She is no longer entering these matches as some unknown player with nothing to lose. Opponents know exactly who she is. They know the left-handed patterns. They know how aggressive she can be. They know the crowd is likely to be behind her in cities with large Filipino communities. And they know that if they do not finish her when they have the chance, she can come back. That reputation is valuable. It creates pressure before the first ball is even struck. McNally's own path into this match showed why the win carried weight. She was not some overmatched opponent. She had just beaten Noskova, the reigning Wimbledon champion, in straight sets. Noskova had won her first Grand Slam title only weeks earlier, defeating Karolina Muchova in the Wimbledon final. So Eala was facing a player whose confidence had every reason to be sky high. And still, Eala survived. Then there is the crowd. You cannot tell the story of Alex Eala in Toronto without talking about the Filipino support. The sight of Philippine flags across the stadium has become one of the defining images of her rise. Tennis is an individual sport, but when Eala plays, it often feels like an entire community is competing with her. That connection has real commercial impact too. Toronto tournament director Carl Hale said Eala had driven extraordinary ticket demand, with reports pointing to more than 5,000 tickets connected to interest in seeing her play, more than the grandstand could accommodate. That tells you something bigger is happening. This is not only about rankings. It is not only about forehands and backhands. Eala is becoming a draw. Fans are buying tickets because of her. Filipino communities are organizing around her matches. People who may not normally follow every week of the WTA Tour suddenly care about the order of play because Alex Eala is on it. That kind of connection is rare. And for Philippine tennis, it is enormous. Eala was born in 2005, and she is still incredibly young relative to what she is already experiencing. Yet she has reached a stage where packed stadiums, huge expectations, national pride, and intense scrutiny are becoming part of the job. That can lift a player. It can also become heavy. Which is why performances like this one matter. She was not perfect. She did not need to be. She simply refused to go away. That is the real story behind the Toronto thriller. McNally had every right to walk away disappointed. She had chances. She had momentum. She believed at least one key decision went against her. She pushed Eala into a physically and emotionally exhausting fight. But by the end, she also had to confront the reality that Eala had answered every major challenge. The injury scare. She continued. The lost second set. She reset. The pressure. She embraced it. The late tension. She stayed composed. And when it was finally time to close the match, she found a way. That does not make Eala unbeatable. No player is. It does, however, make her dangerous. And that is the message the rest of the WTA Tour should take from Toronto. Alexandra Eala is no longer simply a promising young player building towards some distant future. The future is arriving right now. She is winning big matches, filling stadiums, surviving physical setbacks, and making experienced opponents work for every point. For American tennis fans, that makes her one of the names worth following as the North American hardcourt season moves toward the US Open. Because runs like this can change quickly. One tournament can become two. Confidence can become belief. Belief can become expectation. And suddenly a player who entered the season as a rising talent is being discussed as a legitimate threat in every draw she enters. Whether Eala can carry this momentum all the way into New York remains to be seen. That is the beauty of sports. Nothing is guaranteed. But one thing became very clear in Toronto. If you think Alex Eala is finished because she is hurting, because she lost momentum, because the match has turned against her, or because an opponent has started believing the upset is there for the taking, you had better make absolutely sure you finish the job. Caty McNally found that out the hard way. She pushed Eala. She challenged her. She frustrated her. She forced her to fight through pain. And after 3 sets, Eala was still standing. The crowd was still roaring. The Philippine flags were still waving. And Alex Eala was moving on. For more tennis stories, match breakdowns, and the latest updates from the tour, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because if Eala keeps playing with this kind of fight, Toronto may be only the beginning.